It is Friday, November 14th. Let's talk PlayStation. Welcome back, everyone, to episode 700 of LTPS. Stay tuned to the end of the show where we do a little thing every 100 episodes, but we still have a lot of news items to go over. So first, as always, a PS Plus Essential November lineup reminder. The games are now live on PSN. Make sure you claim those. Also, we have the PS Plus Extra and Premium November lineup announced as well, going live this coming Wednesday on the 18th. And for PS Plus Extra, we have Grand Theft Auto 5 headlining, but that game tends to go in and out of services pretty often. It's usually 6 months, so it's back again. There's that. Honestly, I would argue that the other games are much more interesting here. There's Pacific Drive, Still Wakes the Deep. Those are really fun. Thank Goodness You're Here. These are all very fun, doable platinums over the weekend. I recommend those. There's the Talos Principle 2, MotoGP 25, and then going into PS Plus Premium, we have the Tomb Raider Anniversary PS2 version, which we were expecting as well. Now, in other PlayStation Plus news, we also have the announcement of Red Dead Redemption getting a PS5 native version, which is your typical PS5 upgrade. It is going to be free for existing PS4 owners. 4K, 60 FPS, up to 4K resolutions is what they're saying. Enhanced image quality, HDR, all the fancy bells and whistles, but the game is also launching into PS Plus Extra, so it does come out December 2nd. It will be available on PS Plus Extra right away, so you don't have to wait until the PS Plus lineup going live at the midpoint of the month. It will launch into Extra, so that is actually very nice to have, especially since it's Red Dead 1, and everyone's still kind of waiting for Red Dead 2 to get a native PS5 version, so it would be a great way to get caught up there, playing Red Dead 1, then you can hopefully get 2. At some point when they finally confirm that, I assume it's not too far away, but that was still a very nice thing to hear about. Anyway, moving on to our first proper news story, Sony has finally confirmed the existence of that PlayStation 5 Fortnite Black Friday bundle. They did not put a price on it just yet, so the one thing that's really important, they didn't say just yet, but they did confirm that yes, this Fortnite bundle is coming out November 22nd. It comes with exclusive Fortnite cosmetics and 1,000 V-Bucks. So while we don't have a price for the US or anywhere else, we do have a follow-up report from Bill Bukun over at Deal Labs, where they did provide some pricing for the consoles in Europe. So it should be €100 off the disc consoles and $150 off the digital edition. PS5 Pro will also be $100 off as well. As for the US, I would think it's also probably something similar, $100 off the disc console. Hopefully we get something as aggressive as $150 off for a digital edition console or something even remotely similar. But this usually is around the time where it's a great time to buy PS5 hardware, especially with all the recent price increases. That, and also hopefully we see PS Plus discounted as well, alongside maybe some DualSense controllers and a handful of games as well. Next up, we have some brief words about the PlayStation Portal with its recent 6.0 update where it added PS5 game streaming. So recently speaking with Tech Radar, we had the Senior Manager of Product Development, Takuro Fushimi, revealing some interesting tidbits about the device where they say, quote, "Our data shows that PS Portal users are more engaged than non-users. The PS Portal has now become the most widely used device for PS5 remote play, surpassing mobile, PC, PS5, and PS4. Can't say I'm too surprised. The PS Portal is a very specific, purpose-built device that is, I would think, still relatively niche, but we got that sales data for the US where the Portal has a 5% attach rate to PS5 consoles sold in the US, which may sound small, but given what the Portal is, that seems much higher to me than you would reasonably think. So for what was initially a remote play screen, now it has PS5 game streaming. Yeah, if you're buying the Portal, you're probably a very highly engaged PlayStation customer that is buying and playing games quite often, and so therefore your remote play usage and usage on PlayStation in general is likely very high. Alright, let's move on to some PlayStation Studios game news here, and there is some big stuff going on. And it's funny because this past Tuesday, me and John are filming Click R3, our PlayStation podcast. At some point, the topic of mobile comes up. And I say, like, oh, the company's made no progress in the mobile space. They've tried for years, but as recent as the PS Studios mobile division, where that was formed, nothing has come of it. And so I was quite dismissive. And then 2 days later, we had two big bomb drops, which first up is Horizon Steel Frontiers, a new MMORPG for mobile and PC. And this is the game developed by NCSoft. So there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of details. So first, what we do know is that the game is developed and published by NCSoft. It's all under license from SIE and supported by Guerrilla and PlayStation Studios. The Horizon creator and studio director at Guerrilla, Jan Bartenvik, said this game was designed specifically for mobile, but the current platforms is mobile and PC. So that's right, no PlayStation 5. Now, I will say it's really important to clarify, the PC version is through the purple NCSoft PC launcher under emulation. They can still make visual improvements under that launcher, and that's why visually the game looks really nice for what is specifically a mobile game, but that is important context there. And the game does take place in the Deadlands, which is a location inspired by Arizona and New Mexico. It is a PvPvE experience, so you can fight machines and rival tribes. There's unique combat elements that they've designed, so there's things you can do outside of the typical Horizon combat that we've known so far. So you can use things like the Pullcaster to ride enemies. You can inflict status effects on them in combat. You can also carry dropped weapons and put that onto the mount and carry that to a different battle. There's a very deep level of character customization available as well, and you can pick a tribe that you can join immediately when you start the game. And so for those wondering immediately why there's no PS5 version, Guerrilla did put out this sort of indirect statement on Twitter, quote, "We've loved collaborating with NCSoft and are beyond excited to be able to hunt machines together in the world of Horizon. At Guerrilla, we're still busily working on more ways for you to do just that. More on that to come." Now, the following day, Jason Schreier also reconfirmed that Guerrilla still has their own other in-house multiplayer games still on the way, and that should be their next big project. Now, to wrap up this whole thing, we're also hearing from the Korean site RuliWeb that the development team at NCSoft has confirmed they are using Gen AI for a number of things in this game, like testing combat scenarios, to coding, and yes, art as well. So there is a lot to unpack here from what is a singular game announcement. What I will say immediately is that it does look genuinely compelling, just in that it is Forbidden West. It looks like Forbidden West or Zero Dawn Remastered. The game looks very pretty, and it's the hyper-realistic graphics. The only thing that really looks different is that it's so evident that it's made by NCSoft because you've got the Korean beauty in the faces. So, I mean, that's one element where you can see where that DNA comes from that studio in particular. But it looks like Guerrilla had a direct hand in making this game with how visually appealing it looks. It does have the hyper-realistic, vibrant, lush environment that Horizon is known for. It's just plopped into that MMORPG genre of now throwing in more players, and that then gives it this slightly different identity of, well, now you have more people attacking these machines, so now it looks more like a Monster Hunter. But that's sort of where it could have gone. And so I'm surprised at now seeing it in play that, like, oh, this does look genuinely compelling, and I think it has a real shot. The other context of this announcement is that initially it leaked, but it was supposed to be shown off at the Korea G-Star event 2025. And so they're showing this game off to the audience that needs to see it. It will be released globally, obviously, but that is the purpose of this game and the way it was initially shown off, and that, yes, it is a mobile experience first. And so that's the other weird contention point. And I say weird because, like, I guess the sort of minimum here is, like, even if people generally, I guess, more in the core space, the core audience, maybe folks that would be watching this channel or be in the other circles where you enjoy single-player games, you see a live service title get announced, it's an immediate eye roll. But the minimum here maybe should have been, it's still a PlayStation game. How is this not on PlayStation 5? And I would think that with NCSoft, where they have a lot more autonomy on this particular game because they're licensing it from SIE, so they're developing and publishing. The autonomy probably was, we are making a mobile experience first, and for PlayStation that was A-okay because they want something in the mobile sector, because as I ranted on Tuesday, like, they've made no progress in this area whatsoever. In fact, they've had a bit of a reset because they made a formal establishment of PlayStation Studios Mobile, and they've had some serious turnover with the senior leadership, buying a studio, renaming them, that didn't go anywhere. The studio was shut down. We know they've explored various game deals, going to China, talking with Tencent. I mean, Tencent's got to be mad. This is what they wanted, basically, right? And this also shows Sony's commitment to making sure that the Light of Mataram game doesn't go anywhere because, hey, we had this thing in the pipeline this entire time, and that association can look quite strong when now Sony has something that looks visually a lot closer to Light of Mataram with it being an MMORPG. So it's just encompassing that all together. I would assume that that is the sort of point that PlayStation was willing to, I don't even want to say compromise on, because they were surely okay with this game focusing on mobile first. Now, I think it should also go without saying that this game would eventually come to PlayStation 5, certainly if it was a success. So is it weird to announce this game and there's no PlayStation 5? Absolutely. I was shocked. I'm like, how is this not on PlayStation 5? Then knowing that the PC version is actually the mobile version, it starts to come into view a little bit better in that, yeah, this really was a mobile game from the very onset. And so I think it's very contingent on this is going to be, this long-term, ideally live service title that will see support and a roadmap over time. And so, I mean, I would think it's almost a guarantee that it eventually ships on PlayStation 5, assuming it finds an audience and it's highly successful. Does it still seem weird that it's not announced for PS5? Absolutely. The other element, though, is that in a way, I don't know if the word embarrassing makes sense here, but it's just kind of shocking that this thing gets shown off, looks as complete and gorgeous as it does in a 2-year something time frame from when the deal was originally inked. And there is another multiplayer game at Guerrilla that's been in development since 2018, and that thing still has not seen the light of day. And I've thought year after year, maybe this is when they announce it. Maybe this is when they announce it. And it's still nowhere to be seen. Now, the rumor for that game, too, is that visually it was going to have a much different identity from what we expect from Horizon. This has the sort of standard, it looks like Forbidden West art style, whereas the other one, we're hearing it was more cartoony looking, maybe Fortnite-esque. And that is all highly up for change as well, because internally we might have some very early alpha leaks and things like that, but those things are always subject to change, so, and that might partly be why it's taken so long for the game to come out. But we're hearing that should be the next thing that Guerrilla does announce. That is coming before Horizon 3. So in a way, I find it is kind of embarrassing that we saw this thing first and it looks as compelling as it does before Guerrilla is ready to show off their own thing, which that, for that being an in-house Guerrilla title, you would think that is the title that ships on PlayStation 5 day one, maybe next to a PC version as well, whereas this is highly targeted at a mobile audience. So the whole thing is kind of strange. I will also say it's disappointing to hear about the AI angle as well, if only because, as I often say, AI does have a place in game development when it's a safe extension of human work, but I really can't I can't get on board with when it starts being used in such a manner where it breaks into the creative space and you're using it for art. That never sits right with me. So that part, it sucks. But gosh, we'll keep following this game, see where it goes. It's crazy how we saw this thing seemingly out of nowhere as soon as because based on when the deal was inked, and it looks the way that it does, and we still have this other game which is completely MIA. Now we had another not nearly as crazy but still out of nowhere mobile announcement, and that one is Ratchet & Clank Ranger Rumble, coming to iOS and Android, developed by Insomniac Games and OBB, so a collaboration project, and it is a multiplayer PvP Ratchet game made for mobile. It does seem to have a few different game modes, so things like standard death matches, but also this Rocket League looking mode with a ball and a net, and then there's the Bolt and Rush mode as well. It's coming to mobile soon, and you can pre-register for the game right now on the official site, which we are hearing initially some people are already, they already have access to the game, and they're playing it, but it's got a fairly modest art style. I mean, Ratchet has always been more cartoony, so I think it does lend itself quite nicely to this look as well. But this came out of nowhere also. Ratchet & Clank Mobile, only for mobile as of right now, and that too is up for contention. I actually saw a lot of people in more of the diehard Ratchet & Clank community where it's, some of the obvious reactions and that, oh, this is where we're going nowadays with Ratchet and that sucks or whatever, but also like a surprising amount of people that are wondering like, why isn't this on PlayStation 5? I would love to play this. I think it's really cool that they were using some of the PS2, like the soundtrack from the PS2 days onto this trailer for the game as well. So it's very uniquely Ratchet and Clank. It has that feel and look to it. So, I guess there is at least a want and desire to play something that's new in the Ratchet and Clank world that could maybe be analogous to Deadlocked. I don't know if that's really if this game's the answer to that necessarily, but it might be genuinely fun. It's something where I wouldn't knock it until I try it. I personally am not a mobile person, or more so a multiplayer games person, but it's still quite fascinating to see what are two initial mobile announcements that are perhaps, and here's the thing, right? It's a pretty low bar, but these are still by far the most compelling mobile options PlayStation has ever made, I think, well, ever. But that's the point. The bar has been so low. Sony has always been trying to get into the mobile space, and they've tried over time, years with different initiatives, whether it was PlayStation Mobile or these fringe one-off games that like were on Vita and iOS and Android. They certainly make attempts. These two games are by far the most compelling ones so far. It just does look a certain type of way when obviously Sony has been investing in live service and mobile, and these are things that are not nearly as exciting to, a console player that likes to play a bunch of single-player experiences. But, I think that is still the way to probably navigate it, is finding mobile game studio talent, which they've been attempting to do, and they develop on mobile first, and that might be the core, not even issue, just the way to do it before a PS5 version does eventually come, assuming the games find an audience and it's a viable thing to eventually ship a PlayStation 5 version. Absolutely looks weird to not have PS5 be announced day and date, but that's sort of where we're at. So I would love to see this get a console version. It's just, I think that's likely what they're doing, is just taking their time, making it a very thoughtful approach, and seeing if they can capture and find a mobile audience on its own before they throw in console players. In other PlayStation Studios news, actually going back in time for Worldwide Studios news, we had some new light shed on that Santa Monica Studios new IP that was canceled in 2017 during the PlayStation 4 cycle, where Shuhei Yoshida was speaking on the My Perfect Console podcast, and he talked about this game. So he did say, why it was eventually canceled, or at least the nature of how it was canceled, because he revealed that, yes, they did spend many years working on that game, and they spent about $25 million on it before the studio itself approached Yoshida and said it wasn't really working out. So that was a scenario where the studio requested the cancellation, which is definitely some important context, just in that, oftentimes we never know how these projects were canceled or why, and it's not always a scenario of Sony stepping in after 2, 3, 4 years, whatever the case is, and going, you're spending too much money, we're going to shut this thing down. There is, at times, accountability at the studio level of they're not making progress, or they sometimes go to Sony and request that, hey, we were doing this thing, we really can't find the game, we can't find the gameplay loop, we're really trying, we just want to move on to something else. Can we? And it's that sort of, understanding between the two companies to go, okay, that's what's best for everybody involved. And that's what Shuhei was getting at there. So while we don't know that much else about the game, there's rumors, of course, but there's no better source than Shuhei, where he at least gives some insight into the nature of how that cancellation played out. And it was really neat to hear that. He also mentioned how with $25 million, sounds like a lot, but nowadays that would be inconsequential in a game that's getting canceled. Moving on to the PlayStation State of Play Japan Edition episode, which aired this past Tuesday. Certainly a welcome surprise to have a State of Play, and one that was focused entirely on their Japanese publishing partners. So, as per usual, before impressions, we'll do a very quick recap on every single announcement if you did not see it. So, the State of Play kicked off with Dragon Quest VII Reimagined, new gameplay trailer, coming February 5th next year. Then Inkombini One Store, Many Stories, coming April 2026. Coffee Talk Tokyo is next, new trailer, coming out March 5th, 2026. Broken Lore Unfollow, coming January 16th, 2026. And also Broken Lore Ascend, coming summer 2026 as well. Fatal Frame 2 Crimson Butterflies Remake, a new trailer confirmed for March 12th, 2026. Dynasty Warriors Origins Visions of Four Heroes Major DLC, that's coming out January 22nd, 2026. The Gran Turismo 7 Power Pack was announced. This is a 24-hour endurance race event that's coming with the Spec 3 update later this year, so before the year does close out. And then next was Motion Wreck, that was announced, coming spring 2026. Wandering Sword comes to PS5 with all DLC, launching May 28th, 2026. AI, the Somnia Files, No Sleep for Kaname Date. This is coming February 26th, 2026. And then Tokyo Extreme Racer is launching February 26th as well. A new trailer there also. Once Upon a Katamari is getting 2 new DLC updates. And then Pac-Man World 2 Repack Sonic DLC. That's available right now. Digimon Story Time Stranger, the first DLC update is launching this winter, and then Super Robot Wars Y Big O DLC is launching November 21st. Monster Hunter Wilds Title Update 4 is coming out December 16th, and then Sonic Racing Crossworlds Update is coming November 20th. Nevergrave the Witch and the Curse is coming to PS5 and PS4 on March 4th, and then BlazBlue Entropy Effect X was confirmed for February 12th. Damon and Baby was announced for PS4 and PS5 coming 2026, early 2026. And then Kyodan Mekaizum was also announced. That's launching January 29th, 2026. Fate Trigger was announced for PlayStation 5, so that's on the way too. And then Octopath Traveler 0 had a new demo shadow drop right away. It's the first 3 hours of the game. There's a save file transfer available. And then Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls showed off the Ghost Rider design philosophy, a new stage, and revealed the second closed beta test that runs from December 5th to the 7th. Elden Ring Night Rain DLC was confirmed for December 4th this year. And then we segue into Hideaki Nishino talking about the PS5 generation. Kind of weird because he's recapping a large portion of the generation, and this kind of went on for way too long. Then we had the PlayStation monitor announced. It's a QHD display up to 240 Hz, and it also has a DualSense docking station underneath, so a new PlayStation monitor is available. It's 1440p. Then there's also the announcement of the new Japan-only PS5 digital edition announced as well. That's going to cost 55,000 yen, including tax, so about $355 USD. Whereas the base PS5 digital edition console pricing before was about $475 USD. Now, it's still not as cheap as it was when the console first came out, but it should be a decent price drop that is available to Japanese customers only. But I guess the impressions from the State of Play is still the same from when we did the reactions. We always do reactions when State of Plays do drop. And it's kind of like, okay, this is, I think it's nice considering that it's weird because, like, I'm not saying people are in the same camp here, but it often sounds like that when you have a vocal crowd going, PlayStation has abandoned Japan. They don't care about those kind of games or experiences or those publishing partners. But then there's the other camp of, what was the State of Play? Awful, garbage, no major announcements. Which, don't get me wrong, there was no major announcements really. There's nothing here that truly stands out above the rest. But I find it was still welcomed. I mean, if you're into those kind of experiences, then surely something was in there that you enjoy out of that 40-plus minute live stream. So it's kind of a weird thing. Not to say that somebody is complaining about these two things and they're in that same camp, but it's like, it's hard to deny that that oftentimes is how these things do look. It was a perfectly okay State of Play. It definitely was a bit strange, though, that there's really no one major thing that stuck out. For me, it's like, ooh, Coffee Talk. Ooh, Once Upon a Katamari DLC. I'm happy, but either way, I would welcome more Japan-focused State of Plays at least once a year if they can, at the very minimum, tie in one or two big things that sort of leave you walking away going, oh, it's cool that that big thing was announced, and I'm looking forward to it. Now, we also have some Sony financials to go over as well. So we have Sony's Q2 FY2025 financial report. And for PlayStation 5, they are still doing very well with selling this console. They shipped 3.9 million consoles during the quarter. That's slightly up 100,000 consoles year over year. So they're now topping 84.2 million PS5 consoles sold worldwide, which is quite notable given that they've actually increased consoles year over year with a price increase now factored in. Digital software ratio is 72%. That is down from last quarter's 83%, but slightly up year over year at 70%. Monthly active users is 119 million. That's up year over year as well from 116. And then sales are up 4% and operating income is down 13%. The positive impacts are network services and game sales, but a negative impact is an impairment loss against a portion of Bungie's intangible and other assets in connection with Destiny 2. We'll talk about that more in a second. For the FY2025 forecast, this is mostly unchanged. Both the positives and negatives are leveling each other out here, so we do have some tariffs negatively impacting this still, and also a decrease in losses from hardware being positive, so Sony increasing the price of PlayStation 5, that would track there. But we also had the announcement that Ghost of Yotei sales hit 3.3 million units as of November 2nd. So just acknowledging that right away, that is a great number. It seems like that's about what we are hearing. It's hard because at the same time, we can't quite level that off in the same way that we can with the Tsushima sales figures based on when they gave sales milestones. But 3.3 in a month before the holiday season really kicks off seems like a really strong number. And we have to bear in mind that Ghost of Yotei has a higher average selling price. So conceivably, with what was a very similar budget to Tsushima, I would imagine SIE and Sucker Punch are very happy as they're now capturing full profit for every sale of this game. So a huge congrats to Sucker Punch. We'll see how well the game does long term. Now, going into the investor Q&A portion, the QA investor and also the press portion, we have the Sony CFO, Lin Tao, giving some words about the situation going on with Bungie. So Lin says, and I quote here, "Regarding Destiny 2, partially due to the changes in the competitive environment, the level of sales and user engagement have not reached the expectations we had at the time of the acquisition of Bungie. While we still will continue to make improvements, we downwardly revised the business projection for the time being and recorded an impairment loss against a portion of the assets at Bungie." Now, Lin did clarify during the presentation that operating income would have increased 23% this quarter if not for the recognized Bungie impairment loss. She did confirm, however, that live service games accounted for more than 40% of revenue for the quarter, similar to the previous quarter. And they do mention that is recurring revenue. So the thing is, with the live service output from PlayStation, which many look at this as a failure because of all the cancellations, it depends on how you frame it. The weird thing is, as of right now, they're kind of getting exactly what they wanted from that investment, and that they have consistent recurring revenue. Now, mind you, the lack of major single-player games, they did have two recently with DS2 and Ghost of Yotei, but oftentimes if they're not having those games come out, then it's quite easy for the other live service titles, that being your MLB or your Destiny 2 and Helldivers 2, to make up a bigger chunk of the ratio there. But still, it's something where it's making up over 40% 2 quarters onward now. So that is kind of what PlayStation was looking for, recurring revenue. But speaking more on Bungie, I think this is the CFO now being as transparent as they reasonably can, where, they've been a little, nervous to really air out how problematic Bungie has been for the company, and that it was very slowly, the sort of language of, yes, they're being integrated, it's working, they're looking at our portfolio, everything's going smoothly, now back-end office operations are coming into SIE, we're splintering off this one portion for gummy bears, and now we have to say something like this, where they have to properly account for the losses in the value of Bungie and their assets. So it's, hindsight is everything. I'm not going to speak more on it because we have beaten this topic down over and over and over again. The brief recap always is, I think it did make sense at the time, but you just never know until you actually have the company. And there should have really been a lot more due diligence. And Sony, really, they overpaid a lot. And now they're taking the brunt of it. Lin also clarified, too, that it's a non-recurrent loss because, it's over, right? So that is one angle to consider as they go into the next quarter. Now, we do have one other notable comment that came out of the investor Q&A portion from, again, the Sony CFO, Lin Tao. So when asked about next-gen PlayStation 5, the current console strategy, Lin said, and I quote, "There are many active users enjoying the console, PS5. So from that perspective, we believe that the PS5 is only in the middle of the journey, and we are really planning to expand it even further," end quote. So here's the thing. That quote made a lot of headlines this past week. It is perhaps the most inoffensive thing they could have ever said about this console, because it's right out of their playbook over multiple generations and multiple leadership changeovers as well, and that they support consoles for as long as they reasonably can. PlayStation 5 is officially 5 years old, and guess what? That's what they do with almost every PlayStation, is they tend to push them in the 8 to sometimes really mostly 10-year area. PS1 dropped off a little bit faster, but for the most part, PS2, 3, 4, and 5 will have some serious legs. It doesn't mean PlayStation 6 will not come out in 2027. It means that PS6 will still launch, I expect, late 2027, and PS5, with the expected cross-gen period, will have some healthy years into PlayStation 6 as well. Arguably, some might wonder, how much longer will that reasonably be beyond 10 years? Because I think 10 is a very safe expectation. But, I mean, that's something where we don't even need the PS4 cross-gen thing, and we don't need to look at that. Like, they've always done this. So, it's a very, again, inoffensive comment. It's something that is pretty much expected. Let's move on to some third-party game news here. This is one story we could not cover from LTPS last Friday based on when I film and upload, but it was Mass Effect N7 Day, where we had some very brief words on the next Mass Effect. So for N7 Day last week, the only announcement we got was a statement from BioWare's executive producer saying the next Mass Effect is in development, and they're still committed to telling more stories in that universe. There was actually an ARG that was decoded from the blog post, and that leads to a page that shows some of the new art called Civil War, and we can see a Krogan fighting with others as well. So there's something to interpret there. I'm not even remotely up to snuff on my Mass Effect lore, so I'm not sure what exactly that could mean. But it would be slightly encouraging to say that for N7 Day, where they likely had not much to show, they're still committing to the IP for the time being. I would love to see BioWare double down and have a return to form here. So with what they're cooking up for the next Mass Effect, and given the scenario of them feeling like they don't have job security with EA going private, and the owners, like, it's very complicated. I would hope in an ideal world they still have creative freedom to go back and capture the magic that is, Mass Effect 2 and 3. We'll see if they get there, but that's what was announced last N7 Day. Next up, the Elder Scrolls 6 is still very far away. We have some words here from Todd Howard speaking with GQ, talking about the 10th anniversary of Fallout 4, and he did provide a very small update where he said Elder Scrolls 6 is an ongoing everyday thing, which is good, but still the game is indeed a long ways off. So I don't think that really does surprise anybody, but it's at least encouraging to hear that the game is an ongoing everyday thing. The context that he gave is that we needed a bit of a reset. That's why there's that big gap between 5 and 6, which still is so far out. But hey, that's just the small thing to hear about. I've got a handful of friends that, they love 5. Many people do, right? But they oftentimes reach out and ask, so have you heard anything about 6? It's like, no, not really, because that game is still, somewhere in the 2030s, I would think. So just going to have to give it time. Moving on to Halo Studios, which is still quite weird to think that Halo is now a pertinent PlayStation news item, but it is worth mentioning that for Halo Infinite, that game is probably not coming to PlayStation. They're waiting for Campaign Evolved and also this new, we assume, free-to-play Halo game or the multiplayer baked into Halo 7, whatever that plan is for the multiple Halo projects. They did recently clarify with the last content drop for Halo Infinite that the studio is focusing their development on all those other Halo projects, so there's no other major content planned for Infinite right now. And I would think that, they're moving to UE5 full-time, moving away from their in-house Slipspace engine. This is the time where, they're not going to bother with Infinite on PlayStation 5. It's more about everything onward launching on the console at this point. So at least we have some not quite direct words, but some somewhat definitive words on if Infinite will come over or not. Next up in the video game adaptation world, we have some news for not PlayStation Productions, but things going on with Hideo Kojima and Death Stranding. So now we know about a new anime for Death Stranding called Death Stranding Isolations, coming to Disney Plus in 2027, exclusively on Disney Plus. It's being executive produced by Kojima himself and directed by Takayuki Sano. And we do have a synopsis here where it says, quote, "Somewhere in North America, just as Sam Bridges walks through the continent in order to save America, the someones are also trying to deal with their isolation in their own way. An old man trying to realize salvation through ways outside of the connection advocated by Bridges, a female warrior who tries to kickstart a world of constant fighting, and a boy with a grudge against Bridges. A girl who embraces loneliness. On the precipice of the end of humanity and the world, their fates and hopes converge as another story of Death Stranding begins." So that is different from the Death Stranding Mosquito animation film that's happening. That's different. So we have this, and then there's also the A24 thing going on as well. I kind of love that Death Stranding is getting all these different stories that are being told, so I'm all for it. I think this is cool, and this would give me a reason to actually watch Disney Plus, because there's really nothing on there that appeals to me, but this, I think they're going to hook me. Now, I feel like we would be at least a little bit remiss to not acknowledge major hardware announcements in the games business. So we did have Valve announce 2 major products, a Steam machine made by them, and also a Steam Frame, which is a new in-house Valve VR headset. So the Steam machine, here's what you need to know for those that did not keep up with it. It's a Linux-based machine. It's a semi-custom PC in a console form factor, and it is geared more towards a console experience in that you can use it like a desktop, but out of the box with a controller and SteamOS 3, it's definitely geared towards more of a plug-and-play experience. It kind of looks like a Series X that had the top of it cut off, but of course it also looks like a GameCube, or as many people have pointed out, a GabeCube. It's an AMD Zen 4 CPU, 6 cores, 12 threads, up to 4.8 GHz. GPU is RDNA 3, 28 CUs, up to 2.45 GHz, and it's got 16 gigs of DDR5 and 8 gigs of GDDR6 VRAM for the GPU. The machine should also use 200 watts of power as well, so still a fairly energy-heavy machine, and it comes with 512 gigs of storage, or up to 2 terabytes with an NVMe SSD. Power range, it's kind of somewhere between, as Digital Foundry put it, between a Series S and a PS5, perhaps a little bit closer to a PS5, so somewhere below there. And then for the Steam Frame VR headset, that is also very interesting as well, because that's a standalone headset, again, made by Valve, and so you can do streaming, but it is standalone. It does use pancake lenses, and it has a battery mounted on the back of the headset, so it's sort of a 2-factor thing where it's also acting as a counterweight as well for comfort. The battery life is, in the best case scenario, apparently 4-ish hours. It's 2160 by 2160 LCDs per eye. It can do 72 up to 144 hertz. That 144 is being labeled as experimental, so realistically, most games are going to go up to 120. The field of view is up to 110 degrees. It has a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 processor, 16 gigs of LPDDR5X memory, Wi-Fi 7, and 256 gigs for storage, or up to 1 terabytes of universal flash storage as well. So the headset also sounds really compelling. I mean, for me, with the VR space, the argument I always like to make is that that is a marketplace that I think it's more of a rising tides lifts all boats scenario. I think it's not really in anyone's favor to be doing like heavy game exclusivity like Meta likes to do, but you want as many headsets out there so that way the VR market can start to grow a little bit and there's more interest in the VR space, and that provides an area of comfort for developers and that they can make and ship games on various headsets and make money. You need developers to make money, so that's the most important thing. So I'm a big fan of the headset. It sounds great. Really, really compelling. I might just pick that up. The Steam machine, I mean, it's definitely a more compelling Steam machine than the ones from third parties back in 2015. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, it's definitely more of I would consider novelty device. It's something where we don't have pricing. If the pricing is really good, and that could be something where it's a great use case for a certain type of gamer that maybe wants that middle ground. Is this going to reliably cut into the console marketplace? No, I don't think so, but I think it is a viable option for many that are looking for specific things out of that type of gaming experience, and so that's what it's there for. They'll probably still be selling direct to customers as well, so they don't have a retail presence. I don't know if they want to do a retail presence, but if they don't, that means they have a little bit more wiggle room on pricing, and they do want the Steam machine to be very price sensitive. So you would think that it will be in a ballpark very similar to PlayStation 5, if not a little bit under, but it's also semi-custom parts, so it's hard to say. They're still mostly off the shelf from what we're hearing, but Valve getting into hardware, and we are hearing more and more that there's more to come from Valve, which might actually be Half-Life 3. We will have to wait and see, but man, it will be amazing if we finally get that game confirmed. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or X. And for this week, we have a game giveaway, Good Night Universe, which came out very recently on PS5, Series S, X, Switch, PC. It's the follow-up to Before Your Eyes, which was the VR and PSVR 2 game that came out. It was gorgeous, heartwarming, one of the very few games that made me cry, and this is the follow-up which came out not too long ago. This one is only 2D, so anybody can play it, which is good. It sucks that it's not VR, but it's still something where it should be a heartwarming experience, no less. And we have 3 codes to give away, courtesy of Pop Agenda and Skybound. So if you would like to win, follow the link down below or scan the QR code and enter the Gleam giveaway, and we'll announce the winners next week, because we are trying to give away this game. Those are all the stories from this past week that I wanted to talk about with you all, and we had 2 videos recently. On Sunday, as a bonus upload, I ran into a PS3 I was working on that I thought was dead. It turned on, so we explored the hard drive, the save files, as we did in that one upload about the Facebook Marketplace PS3, so that was on Sunday. And then Tuesday we did the State of Play reactions as well for the entire event. We also had the recent episode of Click R3 on Tuesday as well, so that's now on the Spawncast channel. And that is pretty much it. So we are now able to talk about episode 700 of LTPS. We have done this 700-ish weeks in a row, and I say that because there was one week I missed. That was when PS5 came out. But otherwise, we've done 700 episodes of LTPS. Absolutely insane. And there's one thing we always do every 100 episodes, so I thought what would be neat as we look back on episode 600 to see what we did, so take a look. A bit of a routine around here that we look back on what we did for episode 500, so let's take a look. And actually what I think we should do is really reflect on what we did for episode 400, so take a look. Let's see what we did for episode 300. But just for the hell of it, let's actually take a look at what we did for episode 200. And just for the hell of it, let's actually look at what we did for episode 100. And just for the hell of it, let's take a look at episode 1. Roll it. The game. So now we know a little bit more about it. And stop it. Whoa, okay. Looks like I got a little bit better at this YouTube thing, huh? Alright, I think I'm getting a little better at this YouTube thing. If you haven't picked up on it by now, I'm pretty much going to do this every 100 episodes. So yeah, that clip's getting a bit too long. We have to move that to the end of the show. It's getting harder and harder to watch that and not visibly cringe, but hey, that's what we call growth, right? Still got all my hair. A lot more grays, but I still have it. I feel like I really missed an opportunity to include some kind of hidden message that builds out every 100 episodes, and now I can't do that, and now this is going to show up in 800. And I'm giving myself a lot of room there to make the hard cut for 800, so being a little bit more mindful, but anyway, thank you all so much for supporting LTPS for as long as this has been going on. It's insane, crazy. The show has also ballooned and gotten much longer, so thank you for enjoying 40 minutes of me blabbering about PlayStation news for this long. And, well, that concludes this episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Panecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me 700 times, and I will see you all next Friday.